Greetings friends, this is John Queen with the Queen team at Coldwell Banker, and today we're going to talk about homeowner associations, HOAs, and common mistakes and things you should look for whether you're buying a home for yourself or as an investment property. And remember, if you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more regular weekly content on investing in real estate and the purchase and sale of real estate and real estate market information in general. All right, so when you are buying a home, either for yourself or as an investment property, you absolutely need to check to see if there's a homeowner association attached to your property and the community that you're living in. If there is one, here are some things that you can look at in order to avoid making some mistakes or having some problems later. Number one is you should look at the amount of money that is required in your homeowner association and whether there are multiple or multi-layer HOAs that apply to your home. If you look in the listing, you need to look very carefully to see if it's a monthly payment, a quarterly payment, an annual payment, if there's only one HOA or if there's a master HOA above the local HOA, so you have two levels of fees. And in this case, it'll help you budget whether you're buying the house for yourself or as an investment property, how much money you need to set aside to pay for your homeowner association dues. And another thing to take into account is the amount of money that you typically have to pay to an HOA often corresponds, not always, but often corresponds to how strict the HOA may be in enforcing its guidelines. So keep that in mind as well. If you're joining an HOA where it's $25 or $75 a year for the HOA, that's probably a different level of HOA monitoring and HOA interaction with homeowners than something where you're paying hundreds or thousands of dollars a month or quarter. There's just going to be a different level of interaction there, and everything that I'm about to say in this video gets amplified the more active an HOA you have. So once you've identified how much money your HOA will cost you, then you want to look at what services are provided with those HOAs. The first thing you want to look at is trash and snow removal, obviously, especially if you're in Colorado where snow is a thing. You also want to check to see if there are pools or amenities that go with your property, and then you actually would want to, when you visit your prospective home, actually visit those amenities to understand if those are the types of amenities that you would like to involve, in your life to therefore justify those HOA fees. Another thing that you can check to see if they provide water or other utilities in the HOA. Oftentimes for single-family homes, it may not be the case, but for townhomes, condominiums, a lot of times you can find that your HOA fees will cover some of your utilities, and then you can mentally subtract that from your costs of home ownership. If it's already wrapped into the HOA, you don't need to add it in again later if you're budgeting for an investment property, for instance. Now, if you are buying it either as a residential property for yourself and you're thinking of subletting the basement to help pay for rent, or if you're buying it as an investment property, in the HOA covenants, there should be a section where it specifically talks about rentability. Leases and lease terms, maybe a cap on the number of leases in communities that are allowed for rental properties, because some developments will not want to be have too many renters in the community, which can change perhaps the character of a community, as opposed to owners who might take better care, at least in the eye of some of the community residents, than a renter will, who views their presence there as more transitory and they don't feel like they are the owner of the property. Well, if you are buying a nice condo or townhome or even a single family in some communities with the idea that you would like to rent this out as an investment property, you need to understand, are you going to be able to do that on your own, or will you need the HOA approval for that? And there can be two types of HOA approval. Number one, which is not so bad, is the HOA will approve any lease as long as it meets certain lease criteria. So that means more than 1 year in length typically. They don't want an Airbnb situation in some of these communities, and therefore they will say, hey, I want you to at least rent this for 1 or 2 years, but as long as you do that, just submit the lease to the HOA for review that it has those terms, and it should generally be all right. The other type of situation you can find in HOAs, which is more problematic and requires some deeper digging, is if they put a cap or ceiling on the number of rental properties that can be in a community at any given time. And oftentimes they'll do that on a percentage. Say 20% of the properties in this community can be leased at any given time, and then they also might have some lease terms on top of that, so they have to have at least 1-year leases. But if 20% of the community is already rented out and you are that next property and you want to lease your property, you have to wait for a lease to open up, and there may actually be a queue or a waiting line of homes that are interested to rent, but they're just waiting for that window to open for them. That's a tricky situation. So you definitely need to look in the HOA covenants to see if that applies to this community that you're looking to buy into. And you need to bear that in mind, whether you're buying it as a residential property and you want to lease out your basement or a guest bedroom to help with the mortgage payments, or if you're buying as an investment property because it looks absolutely fabulous, it has great location, it'll be a fantastic rental. You need to make sure there isn't an HOA provision that complicates that process for you or maybe frustrates it entirely. Another thing you need to look at the HOA covenants for, whether it's for your own home or for an investment property, is, especially in this time of e-commerce and increasingly the gig economy and work from home, is are there restrictions on people's ability to have home businesses operating out of their homes? And if so, does that again limit your ability to use the property as you would want to use it as a homeowner, or does it limit your ability to rent it to somebody or a certain type of tenant who maybe has a certain type of job? For instance, if they work from home or have some sort of home studio where they invite clients to come consult with them or maybe provide services. If your HOA doesn't allow that and your neighbors take note of what's happening, you can get yourself really upside down with the community and start having violations fees. It can mess up your own HOA involvement if you're the homeowner. It can mess up your tenant's ability to rent the property if their business is being restricted by the HOA after they move in. And also this can manifest itself also in terms of guest parking. So if you are providing a business out of your home, or you're inviting people for business purposes to your home, or your tenants are doing that, oftentimes in communities there can be an issue, especially in townhomes and condominiums, with assigned parking and guest parking, and there usually is a limited number of guest parking, and the HOA, especially the local HOA board members or your neighbors who are maybe monitoring the situation, they may notice that the guest parking is being used on a daily basis by the same types of cars, and it looks like for business purposes. And then again, inquiries can start to be made, and you can find yourself upside down with the HOA when you don't need to. So when you're looking at your HOA covenants, if there's a situation where you're either someone who performs work from home and invites clients over for services or consultations, or you have a tenant that may do that, you definitely want to check are there any restrictive covenants in the HOA that would kind of limit or frustrate your ability to do that to your fullest commercial degree? And also then, what is the parking ability for these guests that are coming in if you don't have your own driveway with a single family house where they can park there? If you have your own driveway on a single family home, the parking is less of an issue. But if you are if you're living in a condo or an apartment facility, or own in such facilities and lease them out to tenants, well then people can get more, shall we say, picky about guest parking spaces, how often they're used by the same types of cars, and you just want to stay in front of that strategically. So a careful analysis of the HOA documents can get you out in front of that problem and help identify if there is a problem that you need to think about before you finish buying a property. Another term in the HOA covenants that everyone should be paying attention to, whether you're a homeowner or if you're buying it for an investment property as a landlord, is the covenant regarding pets. Are pets allowed? Are pets not allowed? How many pets are allowed? And typically, you will find that pets are allowed in a lot of units, but they may restrict the number of pets in an HOA. And this is important. So if the pets are limited to 2 pets or 3 pets, and you or your tenant are coming in with 4 large, beautiful dogs that you like to walk outside, well, then again, that can be a potential problem coming up down the road that you don't need in your life. If the HOA decides to pursue some sort of inquiry, whether you are breaking the pet covenant, believe me, there are other pet lovers in the community who would also love to break the pet covenant, so they may be the first ones that alert the HOA to your status. So you might be walking your 4 dogs, another dog lover who you see and think you're having a great conversation with, that individual may or may not go back to the HOA and say, hey, so-and-so has 4 dogs. At least I think they do. We need to look into that. And the reason for that is perhaps they would like to have 4 dogs, but are obeying by the rules, and they don't feel that others should be able to shirk them. So this is obviously a hypothetical scenario, but the point I'm trying to make is there are often covenants for pets in HOAs, and you do need to pay attention to that, whether you are taking on tenants who may have a large number of pets, or if you yourself have a certain number of pets and you're going to move to the community, because who wants to get rid of a pet just to move into a house? So these is another area of the HOA covenants where it's useful to look at and understand it before you pull the final trigger. A final point I'd like to make about HOAs is, in general, there are often 2 levels of interactions with homeowner associations. At the top level, there's the property management level. This is the professional third-party property manager that the community, usually the board of the HOA, has hired to manage the property. And so these are the companies that you go to first if you have a problem with the HOA. You're typically not going to go to the HOA board members unless you have a good personal relationship with one of them. Oftentimes you're going to go to your property manager if you have any issues with the HOA. And again, before you buy a property, it is this property manager that you really need to get in touch with. Ask any questions that you may be on the fence about or nervous about regarding your use of the property, your potential tenant's use of the property, leasing the property, pets, business, anything like this. The property manager will be able to answer those questions, and they'll be able to answer it probably more fully than even some of the board members can. And the second level of interaction in the HOA is obviously the board members. So I would advise, after you purchase a home, that you attend 1 or 2 board meetings and get to know who the board members are, get their business cards, get their contact information. These are people that you want to be on friendly terms with, obviously, if you're a resident in the community, because they will not only help keep you apprised of what's going on in the community and what guidelines are there, it's more likely that they will be helpful than maybe adversarial to you if they know you and can kind of get their mind around you as a person when issues come up in the HOA, which occasionally they might. And you also then have a resource if something happens in the community. You can call the HOA board member, if you are a friend with one of them, to ask, well, what's going on with the painting today? Or what's going on with the trash removal? It didn't seem to happen as scheduled today. But again, and I'll just reemphasize, the primary point of contact for all this is really the property manager. That's what they're being paid to do. But knowing who your actual board members are, so they're not just names on paper, establishing some sort of friendly rapport with them, that also is just generally beneficial to you. It develops your network in the community, and it certainly doesn't hurt as a property owner or a landlord there. Right, so today we've covered different topics in homeowners associations, from both the residential personal real estate purchasing point of view as well as the investment property purchasing point of view. Again, it's always good to check what are the lease terms for the property, so you understand either what your exit strategy can be later if you want to keep the property and rent it out, even if you buy it originally as residential, or if you're buying it immediately as investment property. It's also beneficial to know what are the amenities that come with the HOA, and are those the amenities that you yourself would like to pay with that money? Or are they subpar? Or do they not compare to maybe some other properties you've seen in other communities where the HOA is maybe at a different level? Also remember that the amount of money that you have to pay to your HOA often correlates with the amount of oversight and strictness the HOA will apply to its rules and regulations in your community. Although that's not always the case. So even if it has a low HOA, sometimes that can change over time, where they bring in a new property manager and agree to increase the HOAs because they feel that the HOA levels, the state of the community could be improved with stricter HOAs. So just because something has a low HOA level now doesn't necessarily mean in 5 or 10 years it can be the case. And just because something has a low HOA dollar amount now also doesn't necessarily mean that the HOA is entirely passive. So those rules and covenants are there for a reason, so you do need to take them under advisement regardless of the level of fees. But again, if you have a property that's $1,000 a month HOA versus a property that's $75 a year in HOA, well, logically speaking, you can understand that there might be a different level of HOA engagement in those two communities at those two different price points. In addition to checking what the business from home rules are in today's day and age and the parking space allowances for either guests or business guests, which can save you a lot of trouble later, another thing to remember is to check to make sure you've spotted all the different levels of HOA fees. Is there a master HOA above the local HOA? Sometimes you'll even see 3 levels of HOAs. And just so you understand what all those fees add up to during the year, whether it's for your own residential property you're living in or as an investment property where you're trying to actually make money from your rent, you definitely want to understand what those HOA costs are. And finally, remember that there are generally 2 levels to HOA engagement. The first is the HOA property manager, who is the professional third party that's been paid to manage everything for the property, and that should be your first point of contact. You definitely need your property manager's phone number, contact information, email, because that is the person you should direct all questions to, not only before you buy your property, but after. And second are the individual board member levels of the HOA, and those are the individuals who volunteer to serve on the community. They're not paid. It's always good to have relationships with them too, but just remember they're human beings. They're not being paid. They're not our therapists, and they're volunteering their time. So keep that in mind, as frustrating issues can come up in the HOA as well, that the kinder you are to your HOA board members, often the more sympathetic you may find that they are to your issues when they come up in the future. And so that's today's topic on HOAs. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative. If you have other questions or topics you'd like me to cover in HOAs, feel free to leave them in the comments. Otherwise, again, please like and subscribe to our channel, and I look forward to talking to you on the next topic. Take care and have a great day.